everybody. Welcome back to Singing at Brick Walls, an Aaron West podcast. There are probably other words in this title.
We've added a lot of words and taken a lot of words out of the title.
Each episode will be a different colon title.
Yes.
There's going to be a different subtitle each episode. This episode, we have a special guest in studio, Noah from Runner.
Hi, Noah.
Welcome.
Hi.
And of course, Dan Campbell of
Hi.
Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties and the Wonder Years.
Here I am.
And I am your
Esteemed host.
esteemed host, Holden Seidlitz. I work at The New Yorker. I'm a writer and a fan of music, and I can't play any instruments.
I bet you could if you tried. And this is exciting because I just met Noah, even though Noah and I co-wrote the song we're talking about. Oh, what song are we talking about today?
Today's episode, we are talking about Whiplash.
We're talking about Whiplash. Which I co-wrote with Noah. Mm-hmm. But we just got to meet for the first time in real life 4 to 5 minutes ago.
It was really sweet.
It was really cool.
I wasn't sure if they were going to handshake, high five. There was a really beautiful brotherly embrace.
We went hug. We went hug. It was as I was walking up, I was like, I want to go hug, but I don't know. I don't want to force that on my guy here.
Yeah.
But we
if
went
we're both
hug.
standing, you know.
No, it was sweet.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that you're both here and that I'm witnessing this very special moment. I would love to hear how you first got in touch with each other, how your relationship with each other's music prior to this collaboration.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm like, who slid into whose DMs?
That was me, right? I like Runner. I like Runner.
Great band.
It just it came to me probably algorithmically, right?
Yeah, we were talking about it over text the other day.
Yeah. That's a thing that happens and happened to me.
Yeah,
And I don't know if it was Heliotrope or what song was that I got first, but it was one of those things where, part of my Tim Robinson here was like directly in my cue zone. I was like, oh, this is exactly the music I want to be listening to. So I really was excited about this band. I was listening to it a lot and I was following you on Instagram. And we mentioned in the first episode that I was supposed to have more time to write this album, but I had hurt my shoulder and I couldn't play guitar. And so I was in this really compressed timeline and I started kind of freaking out. And then one day I looked at your Instagram and you were like, I tore my Achilles, which I would love for you to tell the story of tearing your Achilles because I'm sure that it's incredible. And you were like probably dunking on someone's head and posterizing them.
Yeah.
And, it was dope
More or
as hell.
less. Like you got it. I actually don't need to disclose.
Yeah.
Because
That's it. If anyone wants to I'm stuck in bed. If anyone wants to write songs or do whatever. And I was like, wow, this is I'm going to shoot my shot, right? This is like a real great opportunity where I currently feel like I need help writing songs. And here's a songwriter that I really admire that is just offering that up. And so I slid into Noah's DMs.
Yeah.
How is your Achilles, first of all?
My Achilles is good. I mean, I'm about to go backpacking next week, which will be the first time I've done anything physical since I got hurt in April.
Yeah.
I was playing basketball. We can just say that I was dunking over someone and leave
I believe
it.
Yeah. That's what was going on.
But yeah, I had surgery and I feel like we wrote the song the week after I had surgery or something. And
that's crazy.
It was, I remember it was a couple minutes of delay because I think you were like, I'm trying to get to my bed or something. Or maybe you had to get up because you were literally laid up in bed.
Yeah, and I had to have my foot elevated. So I'm FaceTiming you with my phone crooked right here and a guitar on my chest, just lying down. Such an intimate posture for meeting somebody.
The reason, aside from the fact that I just really love Noah's songs, is that, like I said, I was trying to write in this compressed timeline. I didn't have a lot of time to get these songs out, and I had the structure narratively, but we talked about this on the phone, but there's this, do you like the Mountain Goats?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard the song You Were Cool? It's not on a record.
I had the same reaction. I was like, what record is this on? And then Dan goes, it's not on the record. I was like, fucking Reddit Mountain Goats fan. Fuck you guys. You're ahead.
Fuck you guys. It was because I was at...
I guess you don't really like the Mountain Goats.
No, I was at Bowery. I was at Bowery Ballroom, and he played it. And I was like, what was that song? And he didn't record it. There's only live recordings, and I believe he did it on Marin's podcast.
Whoa.
But the first line is, these are the same 4 chords I play most of the time when I've got something on my mind and I don't want to squander the moment. And but that happens.
Yeah.
And especially when you have to write a lot of songs and not a lot of time, you pick up a guitar and you have the thing that you do when you pick up a guitar. And I was getting very frustrated about that thing that I do. And so Noah was like, what is it that you want help with? And I was like, I want you to put me in a different part of my guitar. I'm feeling crazy about the fact that every time I pick it up, I do this thing naturally, or one of these couple of things. And I feel like it's really boxing in my songwriting.
Which is, yeah, I do remember that. And then it's funny because I then just put you in my box. Like I put you, I put you in the tuning that I always play in. This song is like, it's maybe 5 chords at the end of the day, but it's like they're all the same chords and shapes that I end up using whenever I pick up a guitar kind of mindlessly.
Did I tell you this about Dadgad tuning? Which is what this is in, right? Is that I have this thing, and Holden and I talked about it too, where I feel like I need to, there's like rules for things, right? And I need to get good enough to know how to do all of the things the right way before I'm allowed to break the rules. And I had it in my head that you were only allowed to tune to something like Dadgad when you had like mastered playing in standard tuning. And I am not a good guitar player. And so I just hadn't, right? And I told that to Ace and Nick. I was like, oh yeah, I was a little nervous because Noah wanted to write in Dadgad and I don't know if I'm good enough. And they were like, no, that's like the easiest, most fun tuning to play in. Like everything will sound good in it. And it like blew my mind that you were like allowed to do that.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think Dadgad, it's my friend and I call it the spooky tuning. It's like everything you play just sounds a little bit spooky. Open D is the wholesome tuning.
Yeah. And this is the little spooky, it's fun to play in.
Yeah.
And it clicked so fast, right? Like I think that putting me in a different tuning changed my mindset about it and set me in the right direction. But I feel like we had this like shared Google Doc and I was like, here are like the lyric ideas. And you're like, all right, I'm going to force you. I think I was like, I need someone to force me out. And you're like, well, that's no problem because I'm going to make you retune your guitar right now. And we retuned the guitar and you started playing a little bit and sung like half of the first line. And I like instantly heard the whole song. It was like, it was so clear where it was going.
Yeah.
We probably wrote for...
it was like an hour.
Yeah, maybe not even.
Yeah.
Maybe the fastest like a song has come together for me in any project beginning to end.
Really?
It's so quick. Like...
Wow.
We talk a lot about in Wonder Years, the song There got written really fast, but like still a couple hours.
Yeah.
This was like, and I feel like we really knew where it was going. I don't know, kind of instantly.
To be fair, you had like the whole like skeleton and lyrical concept already done.
Okay.
So
that's
then,
true.
You know, I'm just, just there deserves its
totally,
it keeps its flowers.
Mantle. It keeps its mantle.
It's 3 hours top to bottom.
Lives to fight another day.
Okay.
But it was really nice because I always think like the hardest part of doing a writing session with someone that you don't know the first time is like, well, what do you want to sing about?
Yeah.
And then they kind of tell you about their life or something and it gets like personal for a second, but you're like, I got all these plot points that I need to hit in this song. And I kind of like working from a prompt like that.
Yeah. I really love having scaffolding on which to build something.
Yeah.
I think that's like really important to like my process is like foundation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was like, hey, here, and I didn't know the order of the lyrics or whatever, but I was like, this is the song's about. I think it's going to be called Whiplash. And like vibe wise, I'm thinking like kind of like a slow country feel. And Noah was like, I got you.
Yeah.
It's covered. If there's a thing I know how to do.
Yeah. It's an 80 BPM.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, I was like, how, at what point did you know? Because to me, I mean, the lap steel, I feel like adds a lot of this. There's this kind of like Townes Van Zandt-y, almost like sort of slow country ballad kind of, I was explaining this to Dan that it feels like the kind of Eye of the Hurricane on the record. Like there's this, imagistically, but also sonically, this kind of touching down on a wet tarmac, kind of like you're in between these two sort of storms of St. Luke's and Spitting in the Wind.
Yeah.
And
I do always think about flying as a liminal space.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you're in the air, you're kind of nowhere.
Totally. And I think that, that planes and cars both for Aaron are kind of very important liminal spaces for him, the sort of nomadic traveler character. But how did you know that this needed to be, or what about the kind of, country sort of profile or sensibility did you want to tap into to tell this part of his story emotionally and kind of atmospherically?
Yeah. Well, I think that part of it was dictated by the fact that I had the opportunity to work with Noah.
Totally.
And so I was like, okay, I know kind of what songs still need to be written, right? And I started thinking like, okay, well, which song narratively makes sense sonically with what I think Noah could bring to the table. And it just made sense that it was this one.
And it was very, serendipitous because the situation that Aaron is in the song was kind of, adjacent to my situation. Yeah. I'd come back from tour on Wednesday and I tore my Achilles on Saturday. And I was supposed to go on another tour in like 4 weeks and that got canceled and everything was getting canceled. And I was just kind of like that small liminal space that I feel like Aaron's in for just like the moment back at home. I was like, oh, this is going to be a long one for me. So I really felt like I was in that.
Well, and that, those homecomings can be such liminal spaces too. Like it just feels like I'm not here for long. I know I'm going to go back to do, and it's like sometimes you have to think about who the real you is, right? Like, am I the me on the road? And like, as I have aged personally, those two things become much more similar. Yeah. Right? Like my lifestyle state. I mean, and it's a luxury of being able to tour in the Wonder Years and to have the things available to us that we have as far as like buses and green rooms and whatever. But there was so much touring that I did where we're sleeping on floors and doing these night drives and then going back to working at whatever day job you have and how crazy that effect feels between the two.
Yeah. And when you finish one tour, know that another tour is coming right on its heels. That whole time is a liminal space, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might as well be in the air the whole.
Yeah, because I know that this is just treading water. Yeah. That I will be going somewhere else soon. Yeah. We talked about the interview process.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah, I think it dovetails into that.
Totally.
Because I interviewed even people in the Roaring 20s about this. Because like the people that play in the band are not full-time touring musicians. Yeah. And so I was like, what does it feel like to you when we go on tour and we're in London and there's all these people there and then suddenly you're back at your job, at a metal shop or whatever. And that's where a lot of the, I try to do a lot of interviews when I feel like the subject matter could use more authenticity than what I could personally bring to it. Because like I said, very privileged with the Wonder Years to tour in a different way than we used to and to tour kind of full time and not have to go back to another job. But that is the reality for so many musicians.
Yeah. And I think like the other luxury of touring in a band like the Wonder Years is like you always know that there's going to be another tour.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and I think with a project like Aaron West, what's interesting is hearing you guys talk about this. Obviously, so many of Aaron's experiences are your experiences, do directly emerge from an understanding, a kind of intimate and haptic understanding of what it is to be on the road, to come home, to, but there's so much about his life that is separate from yours. And I think there is this kind of requisite due diligence to understand and fully inhabit this other person's life and experiences. And I would love to sort of hear how you approach talking to people who share experiences with Aaron, especially with sobriety, especially in a project that has to do with such kind of sensitive subject matter and that's so real for so many people as a person who doesn't drink, trying to really understand what these experiences would be like. And, how do you approach the people in your life to talk about these things that are sensitive and why does it matter to you and what's important to you about making sure that it feels right and authentic and true?
Yeah, I think that I owe the authenticity to it.
Totally.
Right. That if I was handling the subject matter flippantly, it would be a disservice, not just to the art, but also just like it wouldn't be respectful to the subject matter. And so when it comes to something, I mean, sometimes it's smaller things, right? Like on the last record on Bury Me Anywhere Else, I'm writing about hopping freight trains, which is not a thing that I have done.
Really?
But I have some friends that are serious crust punks and have spent a lot of years riding freights. And I was like, I want to make sure that I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
And so please give me some of the lingo, give me some of the information. If I wanted to go from here to here to here, what would I ride? Where would I ride it? Where would I pick it up?
Yeah.
And I think that makes the project breathe a lot more. It gives it a lot more life. It makes it exist in this reality more. But it also is paying respect to people that hop freight trains, right? I want to treat their lifestyle with respect. And I want to make sure that I'm coming to it from a place where I'm well researched on it. And that extends beyond that to things like alcoholism and sobriety and the journey between the two. And so I spoke to people in my life that are or were at that time in different stages of that journey. And it was like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I want to do it because I want to do justice to the topic. And I want your actual lived experience. And I think the thing is, most people are really, at least the people I've spoken to, are really excited to tell the story and to make sure that it's told right. And so it was a process of just interviewing someone and saying, hey, what does it feel like? What does it feel like specifically for all these different parts of that narrative? What does it feel like to be drinking on tour and then to be drinking at home? What does it feel like to be drinking in a green room backstage with your friends? What does it feel like to be drinking alone? What are ways that you conceal it, right? Because at this point in the narrative, the drinking and the fact that it has become a problem again is a secret. And that's where that like a gun in a Bible lyric comes from. I feel like without those conversations, those interviews, the project would fall flat.
Totally.
Right? I don't think it exists. Sometimes it's sillier things, right? Hey, can I actually see the New York skyline from the beach in Rockaway? Well, you know what will allow me to do that is Google Street View, and yes, there it is, right? I can see it. So that lyric in Greenlight the G Train makes sense. Sometimes it's much heavier, right? Like, what does it feel like to come back on tour and to have felt like powerful and revered on stage and then go back to a job where you feel powerless and treated poorly? What does that feel like to you? And how can I appropriately get that across in song?
Yeah. I mean, and I think something that is really significant about that process is that it is at once an artistic endeavor as well as an ethical one. I mean, as a writer, the sort of more minutia, kind of nuanced quotidian details, the kind of like pith of our everyday lives, like these really specific kind of fact-checked granular images are what makes Aaron feel so real and what makes his experience resonant with people who aren't even necessarily struggling with alcoholism. I think so much about Aaron's experience, because it's so specific, you know, it's the kind of trite truism, but like contained within the specific is the universal. And I think it's what makes him so kind of accessible as a human, as a kind of three-dimensional person, is that he is this kind of composite of all of these real experiences, that he is like he contains real people.
Yeah. And I said in that little reel that I was like, it's a little bit of everyone I've ever met, which is true, which is true of it. And I think starting the project, I went into it nervous about almost exactly this, because I understood that what made the Wonder Years so resonant were these real details that people could connect to their lives. And they would say, okay, that while that detail may not be shared between us, through that detail, I understand the nerve root of the emotion and I connect to that nerve. And so this song resonates with me. And I said, well, what's going to happen when it becomes a work of narrative fiction? Will that still be possible? And then I thought about it for a minute, and I thought about all of the times that I've laughed or cried or felt joy or felt sadness along with characters in movies, in film and TV, and on stage. And I was like, oh, of course it's possible. I had just been so stuck in this autobiographical space for so long that I realized, you know, that I was worried about it. And then I realized that by bringing actual biographical elements, whether they're from me or from others, into this character, you you end up with something that feels real and fully actualized and three-dimensional.
Yeah. I mean, and I think what's so interesting about creating a kind of fictional music project is that for fans who don't know you, the specifics of Aaron's life and the specifics of your life in Wonder Years songs are like ultimately have the same resonance, because it's not like, you know, he is as real. So many of my favorite musicians that I don't know and will never meet and will never encounter in real life, the kind of stories of their lives in songs are equally real to me as fiction, because I'm experiencing them the same way. And so what matters is the way the text is constructed, is the craft, is how much are you allowing them to see, and what does it feel like? Because it's not necessarily of consequence to a listener who is unfamiliar with the individual behind the music. It just needs to feel real. It needs to feel true. And I think the process of research, the process of this kind of painstaking, respectful, dignifying, kind of songwriting protocol is what allows for that connection.
Yeah. And I think it's absolutely true, because when you think about, I don't know if you ever lived in Rhode Island. Right? You did. But you didn't have to, and I would have believed it to be true. Like,
yeah, well, because
I don't know how much time you've spent hanging out beneath a heliotrope.
Yeah.
But I connect with the songs anyway.
Well, yeah, and I think that like to be a songwriter that performs your own music is to create a persona of any kind. And it's just a matter of like how close is that persona to the actual you off stage. So there's like the you in the Wonder Years, which is probably like closer on the spectrum to civilian you.
Yeah.
And then you get to Aaron West, who's like another persona. And I feel like we talked about that when you were like creating the project too. It's like it was weird for you to sing a song from that perspective and then step out and be yourself again.
Yeah.
So you wanted to embody the whole persona.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that would be so strange.
Yeah, and I feel that way. Like, I like narrative music. I like writing narrative music with other people, but I haven't found a way to like perform narrative music because of that dissonance of, Runner songs feel close to me. They're not exactly me. It's like Runner persona.
But it's very close.
It's close enough that I can take a sip of water between the songs and feel like Noah again.
Yeah, and some of my favorite songwriters are so narrative. The Hold Steady, the Mountain Goats, the Weaker Thans, Bruce, all of that stuff. Ryla Kiley, like you don't know what's your life and what's the narrative.
I think of Springsteen a lot for persona, because it almost feels like I can't imagine him writing a song sometimes. He's just like that mechanic from Jersey who manages to have the songbook of some of the greatest songs ever.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that the one Weaker Than's record reunion tour, every song is a different vignette, a different character.
Yeah.
And they all feel so lived in and so inhabited. I think about the relative surplus value, the end of that song, where he says, what I'm trying to say, I mean, what I'm asking is, could you come get me? And I'm always feeling so much weight in that line and the way that he stutters through it. And it's obviously not John Samson's life. And but he put the work in to understand like all of the elements that would make that story a reality. And I think that's what makes it special.
Totally. And something else that I wanted to talk about in terms of sort of image selection and the kind of vocabulary that Aaron has and uses at his disposal. You mentioned the gun in the Bible line, and I would just love to talk about religious imagery with this song and also sort of with Aaron's whole kind of project and the way that kind of turning away from God is like a part of his story, but needing to find a higher power in his kind of convalescence arc or in sobriety. A higher power is such a huge part of 12-step and all of these kind of sober programs. And I think that the fact that religion is so kind of intrinsic to his nomenclature and the way that he sees the world. And it's like this frame of reference, even if it isn't serving him anymore, even if he isn't, going to church, like this was a part of the kind of backdrop of the world that he grew up in or inhabited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the answer is going to sound funny. And it is, I guess, is that in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
In the 5th grade, my school district did a thing where you could write a book and submit it. It was like a young writers thing. And all of my friends were doing it. I was the only one of my friend group that wasn't in the gifted class, right? Everyone, and so all
You're
of them,
in the gifted class to me.
Thank you so much. All of them were encouraged by the gifted teacher to write a book for this. And they were like, you should do it with us because when you write one, then there's this weekend where we all go to this one school and there's all these writing workshops. And it will surprise you very little to learn that instead of writing a work of narrative fiction, I wrote a rule book for how to play the game of American football. It had plays. It had all the penalties that you could be called for.
Oh, my God.
Ran through all the rules of football. But it got me accepted into this thing, and I just wanted to hang out with my friends.
Totally.
And I took all these like workshops. And one of the things that somehow stuck with me for, I don't know, almost 30 years now, 25 years, was a workshop where a teacher said, if you create a character, I should be able to ask you any question about that character's life, and you should know the character well enough to be able to answer that question. And I think that the religious imagery throughout the songs is a byproduct of Aaron's upbringing, which was religious. And I think that when you are brought up in a household like that, and you go to the CCD classes, and you go to church, and you have all of these religious idols around your house, it's always going to be a touchstone in your vocabulary. It's always going to be built into your lexicon. And it's always, whether you believe it or not anymore, it's always going to be a lens through which you process other events. And so for me, that is a much more minor version of that, right? Like I went to CCD classes. I went through most of my sacraments or whatever. I have a confirmation name, but my parents never really brought us to church. It almost felt like it was rote and like routine and like a thing that you had to do because it was a thing that you had to do. But because of that, I do still sometimes process things through that. And I still find myself using religious imagery in my own life or just like in the way that I talk. And so I was like, well, that should be ratcheted up, right? If Aaron was brought up in this much more religious household, even as a non-believer, he will still process things through that lens.
Absolutely.
No, I wonder if any of the lyrics, so you had the Google Doc, probably a little bit before we started actually writing the song. I think I sent it to you the day before. Maybe I didn't. Was there anything when you were reading through it, like anything lyrically where you were like, oh, this is going to be a part of this song in this very distinct way? Or anything that stuck out to you? I'm just kind of curious what because I told you my perspective was, oh, here's this guy from this band that I really like and I have this opportunity to write with him. But my resting state is that no one listens to any of the music I make and no one likes or respects it. And that's just the imposter syndrome that I have. And so I was like, what was it like for you? Like, were you like, who just sent me this DM? I have to Google this guy? And like, what is he going to write a song like?
We had talked years before because I think like pre-pandemic I was going to open for Aaron West.
I did reach out about it.
That was like a discussion that was happening before.
And I also asked if you could give me lessons on using my Boss SP303 Dr. sample.
Your sampler. It's funny. I think so. You sent me the Google Doc and it had like a gun and a Bible, I think, and you were like, this has to be like the first line or something.
I think I thought it was the first line of the song.
And we hadn't talked about it being like a country-ish song. And I didn't really grow up religious. And it's funny that we talk about this. Like these are obviously like religious images, but because of, I think, my cultural upbringing, I just knew it was like, oh, this is going to be a country song.
Totally.
Because it's also such an American image, right? It is the
Western
it is
Americana.
the confluence of religion and weaponry that exists pretty much exclusively here. Like Christianity and guns meet in the middle at America. That's the middle, you know?
God and violence handshake emoji.
Damn it.
So I think it was funny that like, just from that one line, I was like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to be able to write something in one session. And it's going to sound like, it sounds exactly like I thought it might sound just from reading through the lyrics the first time.
That's such a cool way to be able to hear a song just from the lyrics and to know what it should sound like. And I know I've probably brought up the Hold Steady 6 times. It's one of my favorite bands.
One of my favorite bands, yeah.
There was an interview where Craig was saying that at a certain point they started writing where he would write a bunch of lyrics and send them to Tad, and then he would score it like a movie. You could see the scenes and what is the right music behind this lyric.
listening to those albums growing up and really not being religious and like, you know, Separation Sunday top to bottom. And I think that really, when you don't grow up in like a Christian tradition, but there's so much like art, literature, whatever that does embody that imagery, it's funny. It just becomes like an
aesthetic component.
Yeah, or like the reference for everything.
Yeah. It is like a maybe unfortunate universal reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because like we didn't grow up religious at all, but we went to like every Wednesday night I had to go to this like religious school. Yeah. And it was like, man, we never pray. We never go to church. Why am I doing? But I'm such like, I think partially because I'm so unbelievably competitive. I was like, I must get A's in this too.
Yeah.
Totally.
I have to know all of these
I have to ace God.
Yeah, I had to ace God.
Totally.
And your biblical references will be correct.
And and then later, I mean, not like Craig's, man, cattle in the creeping thing. But
I feel like a lot of what I know about the Bible, I know from Holstead.
From the Holstead. That's really funny. He'll appreciate that.
Well, and it's funny because like you sent me the lyrics for the record before
any music.
Music. So I also had like a purely textual relationship with this record for kind of a long time. And so I also somehow was like, this has got to be a country song. Or like this is like a sort of like Americana because of the same like I sort of like Gun in a Bible. I was like, I don't know. It's like saloon images. It's like he's going to the bar. He's like kicking the doors open. And he's like, you know, like there's just something, this sort of fallen American hero feels very present in this song, in this character. And I think, I mean, there's just something so excruciating and specific about like, you know, we were prophets on hillsides. And there's this like, all the faithful apostles lean in when, you know, he's at the bar. It's like he's this kind of Christ-like figure, but really he's this sort of like, you know, fallen angel. Like he's this sort of it was like, you know, he's the front man and there's this like ego feeling of this triumph of touring and then being kind of dejected and trying to hold on to, you know, the currency of being this charismatic figure in any space. And there's something so heartbreaking about being a prophet on the top of a mountain and then being like, yeah, like my apostles listening to me at the bar, like just the duality of like the subversion of the religious imagery is what's so compelling and what works here so well. And the same thing about like, you know, earlier on the record, you know, the irony of playing in a church basement. It's like there's this kind of unholiness, this like desecration that's happening.
I think ego is a big thing to touch on here. And I think that it was really important throughout the record to destroy what ego Aaron built. And I think this song functions in that way. And then later in a song called I'm an Albatross, there's just this like destruction of ego. And I think that's important in building like, from a narrative standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying, you said earlier, and I just want to touch on it because I know we're running long on this episode, but I wanted to.
The people love it. We've got Noah in studio. We got Noah in studio.
That you said it is this eye of the storm. And to me it is, and it had to either close the A side or open the B side because it is where we start to see it like it brew again in this really kind of dangerous way where from a narrative standpoint we're setting things up to collapse. And so we have the drinking that has gone to a different place, that has gone to a much darker and sadder place here. We have the physical impairment of him breaking his hand and I'm sure that if we had more time, you could speak to it, but just like when your body fails you in a certain way and takes away a piece of what you love to do, right? You personally couldn't go on tour because you had a torn Achilles, and Aaron won't be able to play because he's got this broken hand. Also, one note on that, I think I said left hand, and it was a Noah change to good hand, and it's just perfect. A perfect lyrical change. A perfect lyrical shift.
Yeah, good.
You know, and then the idea of every time Aaron enters a bar and Sam happens to be there, they leave right away.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's an Eye of a Storm. It's a setup song to me from a narrative perspective. It's the perfect song to start to transition into where the narrative goes. And I I just thought that was important for this episode.
Absolutely.
So I'm cramming it in at the end.
No, it's good. I mean, and we'll keep talking throughout the episodes about the way that the songs kind of interplay, because it is such an interconnected story. Like, they're the recurrent characters, but they're also the sort of establishment and development of stakes as they shift, and especially in a kind of linear alcoholism arc. He needs to hit certain kinds of bottoms in order to eviscerate his ego enough to apologize. And, you know, in lieu of flowers, we talked about the first episode. In order to make those kinds of apologies, you need to have really felt like you've lost it. And I think that this is a song where he's contending privately with his sadness before everything explodes.
Yeah. And you also have to feel confident that you did the work that is necessary for those apologies to be received correctly. And part of that is that destruction of ego.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's Whiplash, I think.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Noah, for being here.
So much for specifically flying here from LA for this
just
one
for this.
episode.
Yeah, I flew in this morning and I'm flying out tonight.
No other reason that you're here in New York.
No.
And I really not only do I appreciate you doing this, but I really appreciate you being willing to work with me on the song. Yeah. And it's among my favorites on the record.
It's gorgeous.
I'm really just so proud of it and so happy we got to do it together.
I love the way it turned out. I was listening to it on my walk over.
What we have to do at some point later is release the demo of you singing it.
I have
an iPhone voice note where I had recorded it and then sent it to Noah and said, can you record it and send it back? Because you do some things different vocally than I would do, and I want to hear them and see where I can stitch them into the song.
Interesting. I have to dig that up myself.
When I walk in, Sam leaves. I was asking about this.
I told him.
The note like change that I love.
So you kept it.
I'm like, will you sing for us?
Yeah. Please sing right now.
I'm like, will you sing that?
But like those kinds of things are just, there's different things stylistically, different things at the ends of lines that people just will naturally do because of how the filter through which they've listened to music their whole lives. And so there is a version of this song that's basically the Runner version. Yeah. That someday maybe we'll put it on some sort of bonus thing or something someday.
That'd be fun.
All right. Hey, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys for coming on my podcast. It's been really a pleasure. Thank you guys for hanging out with me on my podcast.
Yeah. You're the host.
The Holden Sidelets Show. Yeah. Next.
That's the colon maybe next time is that it's Singing at Brick Walls, Holden
Sidelets
Show.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
See you next time.